Hello everyone, welcome back to Steam Code. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to create a CSS Visualizer. So here's the example. As you can see, we can change the color, the border radius, and the width as you want. And this CSS Visualizer can work with any type of CSS attribute. I just chose these three because they're the easiest to see when you're changing them. Okay, so inside of our actual directory, we have index.html, main.css, and app.js. And all these are within the same directory, so let's get started. So within index.html, first specify that it's an HTML document with doc type HTML. Then within the head of the document, we'll set the title to CSS Visualizer. Next, we'll link this to our CSS document. So we'll say rel equals style sheet, and then href is equal to main.css. Next, we'll link to JQuery because that'll make the entire process much easier. So just search up the JQuery CDN, click on this link. You can just copy and paste this into your document. This will allow us to use JQuery, the JavaScript library, in our project. So lastly, within the head, we will link to our app.js file. Alright, so that's all we'll need for the head. As you can see, if we reload this, the title is now changed to CSS Visualizer. Now, inside the body, first thing we'll add is a div. This div will have the class of content. Then within content, we'll have another div. This will represent the shape. So class equals shape. Then beneath this div, we'll have a div called slide container. So class equals slide container. And then within this, we'll have an h1. We'll call that color. And then an input type will equal range. Min will equal 1. So that's where it'll start, or that's the minimum value it can be. Max will be 100. Value is where it will start, and we'll set that to 100. The class of this will be slider. And the ID we'll set to color slider. Alright, and so we can just copy these for the next two attributes. You can do as many attributes as you want. I'll just be using these two. Alright, so we can change the second h1 to border radius. Third one will be set to width. For the second h1, for the border radius, or for the second input, we'll set the initial value to 1. Class will stay at slider, and the ID will be border radius slider. The ID for the third one we'll set to width slider. Alright, let's see how this looks. Alright, so as you can see, everything looks as it should, but it needs to be styled, obviously. So we'll do that inside our main.css file. So within main.css, the first thing we'll add is body, and the background color for the body we'll just set to 55407754. You can do whatever you want. This is the color I just like the best. Then for the shape, we'll set the width to 250 pixels. We'll set the height to 250 pixels. We'll set the margin to auto. This centers it in the page. And the background color we'll just set to white. So FFF. As you can see, the shape appears. Then beneath this, we'll specify the style for the slide container. So the width will be 85%. Height will be 100%. Clear both. This just clears both sides of it, so nothing shows up on either side. Text align to the center, so everything is centered. And then margin auto. Alright, so as you can see, those things are centered. So next we're going to set the style for the H1, so dot slide container H1. This just specifies that we're setting the styles for all of the H1 tags within the slide container div. So display will be set to inline block. The font family, you can choose whatever you want, but this is the one that I like the most. So Tahoma Verdana, Sego, and then sans serif. And then we'll set the font size to 60 pixels. And the color, I'll just set to gray. Alright. It looks kind of weird now, but we just need to add the style for the actual slider. So dot slider, the width will be 100% of the slide container's width. We'll clear both sides. WebKit appearance we'll set to none. And what this does is it gets rid of the initial appearance of all of the sliders, so it just starts off completely blank. We'll set the height to 25 pixels. The background we'll set to RGBA 74, 40, 75, 0.788. Outline we'll set to none. Border radius we'll set to 25 pixels. And the opacity we'll set to 0.7. Alright, but as you can see, the actual slider dot is still too small, so we'll change that. But before we change that, let's just add the hover for this. So slider, hover, and then we'll set the opacity to 1. So what this does is it sets the opacity of the slider to 1 whenever you hover over it. So as you can see, the opacity changes once we hover over it. Alright, so now let's actually change the slider thumb. So beneath the hover, dot slider, double colon, WebKit slider thumb. So as we did earlier, we'll set the WebKit appearance to none. Appearance none. We'll set the width to 35 pixels. The height to 35 pixels as well. Background we'll set to 88.5.8D4. You can choose whatever you want. This is the one I like the best though. Cursor pointer. This makes the cursor a pointer whenever you hover over it. And then border radius we'll set to 50%. This just makes it a circle. So if you reload, as you can see, now they're sized correctly. Alright, so that's all the styling we need. So now we can actually make this work inside of our app.js file. Okay, so now inside of app.js, we're going to first say document.ready function. And so what this does is it states that once the document has finished fully loading, then do whatever's inside of this function. So we'll add the event handler, so dot slider dot on input function. And so what this is saying is for every element of class slider, then on any sort of input, then do whatever's inside of this function. Okay, so first we're going to create a variable, so we'll call that val, and that's just going to equal to this element's value. So the element that the input handler was fired upon. And then we'll say if this dot attribute, we need the $sign to specify that we're using JQuery. So if this dot attribute ID is equal to color slider, then we're going to create another variable, so var color val is equal to val times 2.5, and then we'll say dot shape dot CSS background color will be set to RGB at a parenthesis, then plus color val plus comma, and you can copy this 2 times for the blue and the green. So plus color val, then for the last comma, just replace that with a closed parenthesis. So if we reload this, then as you can see, once we move the color slider, then the RGB values change in accordance to that. You can change the values, like multiply it by 1.5 or whatever, to get different color effects. So say I multiplied this by 0.25, then you get a little different color effect. So you can play with the values, see what you like, but this is just a quick tutorial to give a brief overview of this entire thing. So that's it for the color slider. So now for the other 2 sliders, we can just copy this. So if this dot attribute ID is equal to border radius slider, then shape.css border radius will be set to, we can get rid of all of this, it will be set to val divided by 2, and then add the %sign. Alright, so let's change this. As you can see, the border radius changes as you move the slider. And you can change the color in accordance to that if you want. And so now you can see why I set the initial value to 0 for the border radius instead of 100 like the other 2. Because if I were to have that set to 100, then right when I move it, it switches down to a circle. Alright, so back to app.js. We can do it a 3rd time. So just copy that. Actually, we should change that to, we actually do not need this line or this one. And so for this third one, it'll be the width slider. We'll change that to width. And the width will be equal to 2.5 times the value, and then add px to the end for pixels. So as you can see, now the width can change, the border radius can change, and the color can change. And this works for basically any CSS attribute. You can just add a slider and then change some code inside of app.js. You can do it for opacity, for height, for anything you really want to. But this is just a brief overview of how to make a CSS visualizer. And I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and please subscribe. And this has been Steam Code. I'll see you guys next time.